Move now to the aviation sector, where there's been a call for the blacklist of the contractor handling the construction of a second runway at the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport, Abuja. So stakeholders in the airport, in the air transport sector rather, have revealed that the contractor is overcharging Nigeria. We'll take a look at that and what details available to us. Let's see if that is the case and what are the issues there. So during the budget defense session with the Joint Aviation Committee, the Minister for Aviation, Mr. Festus Keyamo, said that after a 3.4 billion naira post-contract consultancy fee was paid to the contractor handling the project in May of 2023, 90 billion naira was later approved in the same year for the whole contract, out of which 30 billion naira was released. The contractor, after receiving the 30 billion naira, joined the Federal Capital Territory Administration to pay compensations to some settlers on land and then left the site. So he says that since then, all efforts made to get the contractor back to site proved abortive on the grounds of unacceptable contract duration being demanded. So the contractor is demanding a contract duration of 532 billion from the original sum of 90 billion naira. So stakeholders are saying they suspect that the contractor is overcharging Nigeria, and if that is the case, they recommend that the contractor be blacklisted. Doctor.
Well, I think it's still a weakness of our procurement system that's actually responsible largely for some of these things that we see, where the procuring regulatory authorities have not been able to actually put their feet on the ground to ensure that when we are entering into contracts as a people, that we meet all the requirements for a certain contract to be done. Now, all these things that we're talking about is that every businessman gets into business to make profit. And if I am taking a contract from you and we have not written an agreement, service level agreement properly, then all these things come back to the table. If I have a contract, the way it is done elsewhere, they give you a contract and they ask you how much. And then they are able to factor in how long will it take this contract to be executed. And you say, oh, this contract is going to last 3 years. Now, in these 3 years, how much is inflation going to increase for that space of time? Then you can put the inflation increment at 1%. Now, if in the course of execution of that contract, inflation has gone to 5%, what do? You can't blame the contractor. Because right there on the contract, the contractor is saying to you, this is what we factor in for inflation. But now you can verify from National Bureau for Statistics that inflation has crossed a threshold of 5 or to 10%. And I can account for this. And the only way that this contract can be executed is for you to review the contract, which of course most contractors in Nigeria are consistently doing. And this is connected to the same issue we just have finished talking about, the inability of both the monetary regulators and the fiscal policy makers in Nigeria to stabilize the macroeconomic environment in which businesses are done. And these are the issues that contractors also face. There are a lot of people in Nigeria, very good contractors, who don't want to get close to federal government business.
Why?
Reason is, they give you a contract, they are not willing to pay. And then you have a contract that you are supposed to execute, and you are pricing it at today's price for 90 billion. And you know that if you have saved 90 billion 2 years ago, or in 2023, you can't have the value today as 90 billion. Because inflation would have eaten it down to about 60 billion. So which means the contractor is actually losing some money. And that's why Wike said some time ago when he was the governor of Rivers State, that the reason why we are going to continue to have uncompleted projects in Nigeria is because the way of this envelope system of doing projects cannot work. What is advocating is that if you give a contract to somebody, give him 70-80%, which is enough to complete that project. Okay. And then if the person is not able to deliver, then of course you can now enforce the consequences that is attached to the contract clauses.
I'll start from the 70 to 80% that you recommend as the start-off fee for a project. So this contractor, aside the post-consultancy fee of about 3.4 billion naira that was paid, the project, the approval was for 90 billion naira. It was giving 30 billion naira as first payment for the project. And then he joined the ministry of the Federal Capital Territory Ministry to pay compensations to some settlers. So I'm believing, or I want to assume that he used from the some money from the 30 billion naira given to him, joining the Federal Capital Territory to pay settlers.
Oh, yes.
So if a project was supposed to cost 90 billion naira and the first issuance was 30 billion naira, so it means that 60 billion naira was still with the federal government or with the Ministry of Aviation.
Yes.
That's way less than the 70 to 80% that you recommend. We did not know the time that passed between when the 30 billion naira was paid and when the contractor demanded for the contract variation. But I believe that some time may have passed for a project that was to cost 90 billion naira to now cost about 532 billion naira, which speaks to the side of the government not fully funding certain projects. And when you said that some contractors don't want to go to close to federal government projects, I understand. Because it seems like you need to have that money as the contractor or the contracting firm to handle the project by yourself for you to take it on. If you don't have that capacity, sometimes the project gets stalled because they give you some amount of money to kickstart the project, but midway where you need funds to complete it, it's stalling, and expect that you use your money to push it forward. But for some contractors, maybe they don't have the money, or they do not trust that if they invest that sum of money in the project, they will get it on time. So they rather put it in some private projects where they're sure of getting back their money, and that's of the federal government stalls. So now the situation is this. The price has changed, or what it will cost to handle that project has changed from 90 billion naira previously earmarked to about 532 billion naira. So the contractor has refused to go back to site except that variation is done. It will be some loss because some money has been committed already. So I think that for those who are saying there is an overcharge, well, it depends now for the ministry to actually carry out some investigation to know what is the actual cost of completing that project and find a way to come to a meeting ground or some agreement with the contractor, because some money has been put in that project already. If you're getting a new contractor, you may get it maybe somewhat less or about the same. But what happens to the money that's already gone into it? So I think that the delay sometimes in ministries of government following up with certain projects is part of the issue here.
Let me give you one simple example. A friend of mine did contract with the Yaradua government. Up to now, it's finished. He has done verification more than 5 times with each regime that come. And he has not been paid. So this is a predicament. So it's not just enough for us to sit and say, oh, these people is overcharging us. But we also look at the circumstances in which this happened, because you can imagine, since Yaradua, 2007, he's still chasing his money. The value is completely gone. The same government is not paying. And they are all queuing up in Ministry of Finance to see whether they are able to get what they have expended. But let's look at the contract. And the minister also should tell Nigerians, was the cost of settlement factored into the contract? Okay, and if it was factored into the contract, how much was the contractor was supposed to contribute to FCT for the settlement. So we'll be sure whether the 30 billion that he has received was used for settlement or he has some change left to continue the contract.
Right. I'm going to look at this particular conversation from the perspective of the astronomical jump in, the cost of execution. That's one. And also the time taken to execute said projects. The former you alluded to, Doctor, the latter you alluded to, Blessing. But let's go back to where it all started from. Doctor, you just mentioned, that there was time in office. The current governor of Imo State, who was I think the House Committee Chairman or Senate Committee Chairman on Aviation at the time, Hope Uzodimma, was the one who, presided over the matter, he and Stella Odwa at the time. And what it cost at that time was 64 billion naira. Now, fast forward to 2019, 2020, you had it jumped to approximately 90 billion. It was 89 billion, right? And then you fast forward again to 2023 when they made the first payment. Yes, that post-consultancy fee and then the 30 billion upfront, which was used to quote unquote water the ground, essentially, or clear the ground, as we say around here. Farmer. So you put all of that in perspective and you ask why. I'm asking why. There wasn't any immediacy, if you like, with executing that project, if it was really important, because we're not the first, country to want to have a dual runway, as it were. So I'm thinking immediately, it should have been followed through. It should have been, something should have been done almost immediately. But the stalling of said contract is why we find ourselves where we find ourselves. But I'm going to ask the question, who is this contractor? And I understand that, there's a difference between what happened 5 years ago and now with regards to inflation. But 700%, come on.
Well,
90 billion to 500 and, 32 billion?
Yes.
That is quite the stretch. So at this point in time, it makes me think that there's something else at play that we're not particularly seeing, because, typically you find that a lot of these people in charge of, the appropriations for these contracts, you see that they put, individuals there as opposed to, constituting a board of managers, right, that would, carry out oversight or that would carry out transparency responsibilities and all of that, which essentially would have given us a proper insight or some serious insight into what is really going on. So the National Assembly at this point in time has questions to answer. The Minister of Aviation, Festus Keyamo, has questions to answer. Who are these people? What really transpired? Because we're talking about blacklisting right now. Is it really about blacklisting or addressing the internal schisms, or not schisms, the internal underhanded business, so to speak, that's going on in that sector? So a lot of questions are being asked and no answer as yet is being provided.
Well, if you look at it and you're thinking or you assume that the difference is too much, well, the difference is much, but we can't say exactly if it's an overcharge or if it's a reflection of the inflation rate. Recall that
700%.
Recall that this project started in 2023.
We can do small mathematics.
The project started in 2023.
At the time,
and this is 2025.
At the time, let's say 1 minute. Let David do the mathematics. At the time, that contract was valued at 64.
At 90 billion.
No, 64 billion.
Yes.
During Odwa, that was 2007.
Then you had Sirica in 2019.
Wait. What was the exchange rate?
It was somewhere between 150,
150.
120, 100.
Okay. Now you can factor that 150 divided by 64 billion. And then divide 1,650 to this exchange rate with 530 billion that you're talking about. You will find that the project will be at the same figure. That is the point I'm making. You see, when you want to sign a project. The procurement law says that before you award a contract, the money to pay for that contract must be in an account.
So there is no delay.
That's what the law says. So you don't award contract in anticipation of fund. But MDAs keep violating that provision of the Procurement Act.
Isn't that what we're talking about?
Yeah.
Something is wrong in this system.
So you violate that provision of the Act and you award contract in anticipation. And at the end of the day, every time you try to factor it into your budget, the National Assembly see the budget and say, we cannot give all this one to one agency. They give you a fraction. And then you go to the ministry, to the Federal Ministry of Finance, their Contractor General Office, they give you an envelope. So you can have a project that's costing you 64 billion, and what you find on your envelope is 500 million.